The Swedish beer can coffee is strong.
Yeah, but compared to US coffee,
Yeah, this is espresso. Normally I have a microphone on this, but I don't think we need to do that. Maybe for the bang, where I do this. Yes, Anders. Because, well, for me, you are the face of Eskilstuna Ölkultur. I always thought you were the owner, but was that correct?
yeah, I started Eskilstuna Ölkultur
Okay.
together with a few friends.
Yeah.
Some 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So and we took different roles. So we decided that I should be the face towards
Yeah.
Eskilstuna, and my friend Artur should work inside the factory more. So.
Okay.
But I'm the face of Eskilstuna Ölkultur. That's true.
Yeah, that's also how we met on the festivals.
I'm thinking when we met the first time, it was on a festival, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Ah.
Many years ago.
And that's how we came up with the idea of doing each other's deliveries to
Yeah.
Örebro. Yes.
Right. We
Systembolaget,
started up with that because for a small brewery driving to Örebro, which is 100 kilometers from Eskilstuna, and how many kilometers from Gnesta?
another hour. So yeah.
It's a good idea to work together with that. To deliver a few boxes.
Exactly. If you're small, you have to work together.
Yeah.
And when you started, did you also pick out the brew house was wonderful, or is wonderful.
Yeah.
Messing copper?
It's copper, but it's only copper cladder on the outside, and it's steel inside because it's for the eye. It's for the eye, and the decision was to have a copper-ish brew house in order to, since idea is to with Eskilstuna Ölkultur this is a brew pub.
Yeah.
This is a brew pub, which at that point in time, when we bought the stuff, 2008, 2006, 7, 8, we were one of the very, very few brew pubs in Sweden.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
Yeah. Wasn't because it's really embedded into the structure, or at least that's how it looked like.
Yeah, it is, and it's very interesting for people.
Yeah, something to look at.
Because something to look at, but it's also a factory where we make beer. But if you look on the other side of the coin, when this is a place where brewers work, the working atmosphere is rubbish because we have 3 floors with different stuff.
Yeah.
But for a brew pub, that's a trade-off you need to make.
Yes. Did you had a vision about the beer? Did you want to brew a special beer, or was it just whatever is in demand at that time? Or
when we started off, we the guys we are old home brewers, and we at that point in time, almost 20 years ago, beer was not a big thing in Sweden because beer was not hype at all.
No.
We were before the hype. I think it was Groucho Marx who once he said at some point in time, I met Doris Day before she was a virgin. Okay, so we dealt with beer before it was hype.
Yeah.
And then we decided to make beer that we liked ourselves.
Yeah.
So we made beer in Belgian styles, IPAs, different kinds of IPAs, and we experimented a lot. But then we got the rumor in Eskilstuna that they only make strange beer. We can't go there because because that beer is
Really?
too strange. Yeah, that beer is too strange for us. And people came into the pub and said, "Don't you have any normal beer?" We hadn't. So then we decided. I went home one day and I decided we must have a proper lager.
Yeah.
And I made a recipe for. It took me 15 minutes. Then we
Yeah.
had Stolt Lager, which is the biggest product we have now.
Yeah.
So we should have done that from the start, because we got the reputation in Eskilstuna. You can't drink that beer; it's too strange. Because if we had started during the hype time, it had worked. But we started before the hype.
Yeah.
Before Doris Day was a virgin.
I don't know. I always thought that, you know, for a small brewery, you can target a small market. You know, already I think it was the first year, I met a brewer who was at that time already struggling, and he was making lager, but then, you know, with a 500 liter setup. And I think you're you know, first of all, the people that drink lager, I think they're not really willing to spend a lot of money on it.
No.
You know, if they can choose between just a good cheap lager and a maybe not so good but more expensive lager, then there's not a lot of added value. So I always thought, you know, like making a blueberry muffin sour, that, you know, that can target a smaller piece of the market.
Yeah.
A market that is willing to pay more because, yeah, it's a more unique product. But of course, if you have a brew pub, it's different.
Yeah.
Because I'm also from the time that you're going to a bar and you just say 2 beer please.
Yeah.
And you would get a lager.
True. True. I think if the business model is only a brewery, like you had in Gnesta and made some great stuff, really great stuff, then you should try to hit the market where you make exclusive products, niche products.
Yeah.
But if you have a brew pub, it's a trade-off, because you need to balance sort of experimental beers with more normal beers that people who goes to a pub drink.
Because there are still a lot of people that go to the bar and say, give me 2 beer.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. That's the way it is. So we've been between those poles for a long time, I would say.
Yeah.
Really.
And then somewhere, when we still, you know, saw each other on a regular basis, at some point you didn't work at Eskilstuna anymore. You got the job here.
Yeah, true. I finished as managing director more than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I had been the boss for 12 years, and that's a long time. And I somehow thought that I was, I've done it.
Okay.
And it sort of goes round and round in circles.
Yeah.
Every year is the same, more or less. And I think I've done this now.
Okay.
So then my colleague Arto took over and ran it as a director for up to now, more or less. And I stayed a few years more just to manage the sales, because I had managed the sales for working with customers for all the time. And I went down in working time and stayed 2 more years just to handle the sales. And then in 2020, I said, this is enough. And then I started to work within the energy sector, making companies to be energy efficient. And I've done that now I'm into the 4th year, and I'm having great fun.
Yeah.
And
after this it was pizza, right?
Yeah, and my I'll come to that. And my pitch, if you say, you must pitch it in Swedish. That in English it's beer Anders went electricity Anders, but that's not funny. But in Swedish it's öl Anders became el Anders, and that's more fun.
Yeah.
So, but I started over as a home brewer again.
Yeah.
Making, I have a home brewery called Galna Åsnan, the crazy donkey. But I should have brought a few bottles for you. I missed that. Shit.
Should have brought a bottle of the first beer, of the beer that I made with my own malt.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I've heard about that.
It was nice. It actually became more fruity than I expected, but you know, I was just curious to see if the malt actually had enough enzymes, you know, to ferment the sugars. And yeah, it did. It actually was as good as store bought.
Okay.
So that was nice.
Interesting. Really interesting.
But so you didn't you didn't end your function because of changes in economics, or
no,
it was pure interest?
No, pure interest. I was getting a bit bored because it was the same over and over again.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy who likes changes in life.
Yeah.
And now I have a new change coming up here. Crazy idea that I'm gonna make very special pizzas together with two colleagues here. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, curious.
I can send you a link to Ben. It's a guy who is called Ben, who is a bit strange, who is our leader, and you need to see him to understand that. But I can send you a link about that.
Sweden had, after having sort of a history of only the Stuart and Stark, I think since they became part of the European Union, suddenly it was really booming business.
Yeah.
Do you think it's still booming business? Or?
Good question. When we entered the European Union, we could have stronger beers at Systembolaget. Before that, I think it was 5.6% or something. Beer couldn't be stronger. But then the Belgian stuff arrived with the EU. And I was early. Around that time, I started to drink Belgian beer because I worked for IBM, a big company, and we had an office in Brussels where I was now and then, and for long courses. And then I started to look into Belgian stuff.
Yeah.
Because we know that, both you and me, that if you go into the Belgian mud, you never go up, because that's where you want to be. Why should you go elsewhere?
Yeah.
If you dive into that pond, you stay there for life.
Yeah.
But the market is. I've been thinking a lot about market development because, as I said, we started Eskilstuna Ölkultur before the hype arrived, and then suddenly, 2010, 2012 or so, we were on top of the wave. Suddenly, we were a young brewery with lots of beers, and we were quite early in a young market, and everyone was asking for our beers 1 or 2 years. And then there come other breweries that were younger, so you get old fast. You get old fast in that business.
Now, how did you enter Systembolaget? Because you didn't.
No,
did you?
That was not our plan from the beginning. Because when we made the first business plan for Eskilstuna Ölkultur, the Systembolaget was not there because there were no licenses for a small brewery to sell to Systembolaget. I think those laws changed around 2008, 2009, that you could deliver beer to the closest Systembolag.
Okay.
And then the three closest, and then also Örebro to get out to all of Sweden. So we went into that, and we need to change lots of things because Systembolaget is a good market. You can say a lot about Systembolaget, but my main comment that I always say is, without Systembolaget, small brewers in Sweden wouldn't exist. because with Systembolaget they have a customer who orders regularly and always pay the invoices in time.
Well, that's true.
So that's true. So
Yeah, and you know, if you deliver to the main distribution center, to the main depot,
yeah,
then you have also whole Sweden.
you have whole Sweden, and you get the same money for the beers who goes through that channel. So we like Systembolaget a lot. But if you enter that market, we made the conclusion that we have to. You can do it different ways with Systembolaget. You can have new beers every month or every second month, and we tried that to the limit. I think at one point in time we had 29 different beers at Systembolaget's shelf here in Eskilstuna. So when someone from Holland or elsewhere came into that store, and Eskilstuna Ölkultur is everywhere, that's the big brewery, but it's only in that store.
Yeah.
And then Systembolaget told us you can't go on like that.
No.
And then they put on limits how many beers you could announce, and then but that was a fun period.
Yeah,
all exploding with new stuff. But to survive,
but you also
all the
started
time,
with one shop.
Yeah, one shop.
Okay.
Yeah, one shop.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
Yes.
And then 3.
Ah.
Within close distance
Yes.
of the brew house.
Ah. Same for me.
Mm.
But don't you think, because you know, you said a lot of breweries cannot exist without Systembolaget. But what if there was no Systembolaget, but there were just privately owned shops?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I don't think, if you look into Denmark, for instance, if you go and buy beer or wine in Denmark, what do you see if you go into ICA or Coop in Denmark? It's not quality stuff. It's cheap stuff standing there. So
That's Denmark. I mean, if you go to the Netherlands, even in the supermarket, there's a wide variety of Belgian beers and local.
But my thinking on that is that I want Systembolaget to survive, because small breweries wouldn't come out in the market in such an easy way if Systembolaget is gone. But the big thing that I worked on in the area of organization of small breweries, we met people in Riksdagen. What's that? It's in the parliament members.
Yes.
We met them several times and said, please give us differentiated alcohol tax as a producer, like we have in the rest of EU. And that is a big thing, because the special tax on beer is, I think in my days it was 10 crowns a liter for a normal lager beer, 5%. And if we were a normal European country, that would be 5 crowns instead of 10 crowns.
Well, right now, if you compare it to Germany, it's like 10 times as much.
Yes, that's the big thing.
And then you don't even calculate the tax reduction as a small producer.
No.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah, so this is the big thing and that after I quit, many of my colleagues have started to meet parliament members over and over again. I think it can happen. Because in EU, one of the good things with EU is that they want small companies to survive, not only that the big ones should take over everything. So that's a good thing with EU.
Yeah,
so
it's easy to implement, it doesn't really cost much,
No.
And because I think that also, I mean, I spoke with Eric from Brestex, and he just said that the whole system is just absurd when it comes to, he doesn't believe that this can be fixed for, the problems for small breweries there. It cannot be fixed with a Band-Aid, he thinks it should just be all thrown out. You know, the whole Systembolaget
Yeah.
with their ridiculous rules on the labels.
Yeah.
And, you know, you are a little bit. You know, it feels
Yeah,
like you're a little bit
because
tight. You know,
yeah,
having just one shop.
yeah, because this is different things. I mean, selling to Systembolaget, yes or no, or leave it open on the market. That's one discussion, and the special alcohol tax is another discussion.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't mix them up.
Okay.
But this with taking away the high alcohol tax and making us a normal European country,
Yeah.
that's
Because all
that's a
other-
big thing.
Yeah.
In our little brewery, I calculated on that, and if we had had a normal European alcohol tax, I could have ordered one more. I could have one more employee
Yeah.
in the brewery, which I
Exactly.
needed. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
Yeah.
That's a big
Yeah,
thing.
and just, you know, I mean, a lot of breweries, they are on the countryside. You know, they are not in the big cities, or at least, you know. And it brings work. You know.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the-
and that
to the places
that was
that are-
our argument that for the state we are so small, the microbreweries. So if you give us that reduced alcohol tax, the state is losing so little on
Yeah.
that, and instead because we have the employees in the brewing industries, they are among the small breweries. That's not the big breweries.
No.
So
And it's no cause for, you know, a lot of discussion.
no.
You know, if you take the discussion of ending Systembolaget or selling straight out of the brewery, you know, possibly,
Yeah.
that's a huge discussion. There's a lot of, you know, people have very heated opinions about it, but, you know, like a tax reduction, I think you can do it, and everybody said, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Easy.
But,
Easy. But another discussion which we were into a few minutes ago is, where is the market going?
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about that.
Mhm.
And I say, John Lennon sang "The Dream is Over" in one of his records. And I say, the hype is over.
Mhm.
Beer is not hype anymore.
Mhm.
We were on top of the waves, a very hyped brewery, because beer was so hype in 2010, 2012. And now it's not commodity, but other things are hype.
Mhm.
And
But do you think that you know, the microbrewery need to live in a hype state to be able to survive? I mean, if you go to Belgium, every small town has a small brewery,
yeah,
and they make whatever kind of beer. You know, it's not a hyped beer; it's just they make beer,
yeah,
and they can do that because, you know, yeah, they can survive in a state of non-hype.
yeah, and that's the ultimate solution.
Yeah.
Because if I look into my own preferences on beer and what beer I'm trying to make in my home brewery now, many years later, I'm not looking into making experimental beers anymore.
Mhm.
I'm trying to make the perfect triple.
Yeah.
And I'm trying over and over again to make a triple as close to Westmalle triple, which is my reference beer. And I'm working on it.
The golden Corollas, Gouden Corollas, that's my favorite.
Okay, okay.
And I came very close to that. It needs to be a little bit sweet, a little bit spicy.
Yeah.
And I find it actually better than the Westmalle triple.
Okay, I will try. I will
yeah.
try. Okay. And then I'm making, my wife loves both triple and also Saison. And I'm trying to come as close to Saison Dupont as possible, because also that's a reference.
Yeah.
And that's not hype at all. That's very traditional beers that has been around for a long time, but to me they are some of the greatest. And a new one I started up was to make a clone of Timothy Taylor's Landlord, which is a perfect real ale, a perfect bitter. And I made my first try this summer, and yeah, promising.
Yeah.
So the hype is over, and I'm not making hyped beers anymore.
No.
I'm looking into well-balanced beer in well-defined styles. And that's not hype.
Yeah, talking about the end of the hype, today I read, what was it? Uppsala Beer and Whiskey is bankrupt.
They are?
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't know
I
that.
read today. It was somebody posted something on that.
Okay.
So I noticed already that, yeah, also the festivals became less
Yeah,
less popular.
yeah.
Only
And
the
we
good ones.
and my take on that is thinking a lot of festivals, and you should try to do something local in
Yeah.
your local area,
Mm.
and get people from the town, this town and towns around, and,
Yeah.
and the countryside to come and come to our festival, a local festival.
Yeah, and then you can invite the local sausage maker and the cheese maker,
and do that.
really make it a nice little market.
Yes, we looked into that, and didn't take really the step into that, but we had discussed here with the municipality to do something like that in a local beer and food market.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and you have those little festivals in the Netherlands too. You don't really have those big organized. I found that very Swedish, the beer and whiskey festivals.
Yeah.
But, especially in these conference halls.
Yeah.
That
a strange environment.
yeah, it's not very
No.
cozy. It should be
No,
outside with some
yeah.
food trucks and some hay bales to
Agree.
sit on.
Agree.
Kind of,
Agree.
like I said, I grew up in the Netherlands, and then Belgium was just a half hour away. So for us, it was a very easy way to be in a different country very quickly, and then to have this culture, and especially this beer culture. And it's not a hype, because they have this beer culture for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And it feels so rich, to have that kind of variety everywhere.
Yeah.
And one of the things as soon as you cross the border, there's a big warehouse, and it's just crates stacked up on top of each other, and you pick an empty crate and you just fill it up with and labels you have never seen, and some are hand slapped. You can see they look a little bit. Some serious handcraft. You can see somebody just kept that by hand.
Yeah.
And I found it very charming, and I found that it makes the culture very rich. If only the bigger breweries can survive, they all at some point start to target the big market, so you get such a uniform product.
Yeah, but my take on that is, as I said before, that as a microbrewery, you should try to explore the local market as much as possible. That you get lots of fans and loyal customers in the town where you are, and possibly expand from there to the region, but not trying to go for all of Sweden or export or stuff like that, because only a few will make it the whole way.
But if you have to target a small...
yeah, and then you could discuss that if I could sell directly to the people, sell directly to the people in my hometown, it would have been better.
Saves another, at least 20%.
True. But,
so I don't know,
yeah,
but of course...
Systembolaget has its different sides of the coin.
Yeah. Did you feel that, did you have the feeling that it was getting harder? The longer you had of course, you had a golden period where beer was, like you say, hyped.
Yeah.
And then...
I made a business plan every year, and the plan was I looked at the sweet spot of production for us. That was 150,000 liters a year. So I sold that for several years, but it was harder and harder to find the customers, because Systembolaget was perhaps 1/3 of that. Local pub was 25%, and then I had the other market, to pubs, restaurants, big conference organizations, and I was working harder and harder and harder on that market.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning it was easy because we were so new
Ah.
in an unexplored market, but then when all these breweries arrived, it was getting harder and harder.
Ah.
So it's tough business to run a microbrewery.
Yeah.
We know that, both you and me.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I'm just, in my ideal world, it shouldn't be any more tougher than opening a bakery.
No.
Ideally, you should have the same ability to sell your product.
Yeah.
And not have all these regulations on how your product should look, and not have like a 3-month. Now, if I want to sell, I had a new product and sell it at the hem shop, I give the guy a call and he said, well, come and bring it tomorrow.
I did that too. That was a good market to sell folköl, 3.5 beer to Hemköp and Coop and those customers, because I could make a deal with them with a handshake like this. I went home and brewed the beer and delivered.
Yeah.
It was so easy.
Yeah.
And also good customers, because they also pay the invoices in time. No problems with them.
Yeah.
It's the pubs that are the restaurants who are the problematic ones. True.
Yeah, maybe. Do you think that brewers are like a special breed?
I don't know.
I know a lot of.
Yeah, I've heard that question before.
Oh yeah.
And I'm from the IT industry. I worked as an IT consultant for decades and went into brewing business, and many people came from IT over to brewing. Also, many people came from IT over to being chefs, like a pitmaster. So, but I don't know. There are different variations of brewers, because I'm a guy who is interested in recipes, the balance of a beer, and how to adjust the recipe so it's as good as this can be within its definition. And other guys are more interested in equipment, to have a perfect equipment and sort of cutting time in a brewing process and so on. And I'm the first kind of guy. So it's different kind of guys who went into this. And I think that when the hype came, and that always happens, if something gets hype, I mean, I have it, beer is in my heart, and it's in your heart as well, and will always be. But when something gets hyped, the other guys arrive, and that's market guys and people who are interested in promotion and sales, and they know nothing about beer, selling products, and they arrived, and that was not so very good, but they always arrive if market is going up. And maybe now, if they perhaps are the ones who fall away first because they go to another hype market. I don't know. They get bored on beer. It was not fun. It was not fun. People not talking about it. They go to paddle halls or other things. I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Let me check my cheat sheet. I think I didn't really need it, but like I said, funny, I put in the Systembolaget quotations, like how many different. When you said it's like a whole.
29.
That's one little idea that I had for Systembolaget to make it more easier for a local market, is to just give them a shelf.
Here is the brewery. Here are all their products. No, you can't do that. It's against the rules.
But I like to make new products all the time, because even after 100 different beers, I still have crazy ideas like, but I haven't done this yet, and then I want to do that. And if they gave me a shelf where I could just stack my products, and,
No.
and it didn't matter what kind of products. I mean, no.
No, that's not allowed. I mean, the whole Systembolaget is organized for making it smooth for big breweries.
Yeah.
It was like that, and I think they have adjusted
A little bit. Yeah.
a little bit. So let's see. Let's see how it goes.
No. Yeah. I think I went through my list.
Yeah.
Do you have any fun anecdotes?
Yeah. Any something more to say? Was it anecdote or what?
Anecdotes.
Yeah, I have one. I have one because the most famous beer that Eskilstuna Ölkultur made, it became our signature beer. That was, my name is Anders, and the name of the beer was Anders Double IPA. That was one of the very first double IPAs in Sweden. It was very famous.
Yeah.
And people loved that on beer festivals. And one festival I remember, guy came running to me and he opened his shirt like this and his breast was here. And I said, write your signature here because you are Anders and I want your signature here. So I wrote it with a pencil on his chest.
So you became you had pop star.
Yeah. And I was thinking when I did that, well, I must have done something good in my life anyway. Yeah. But also I thought, why couldn't the girls do the same? I could write on them too, but only the boys. Yeah. So that was an anecdote from the early days.
Nice. But yes, there's something you think we missed in our discussion.
I'm thinking. I've been working a lot with business development in my old life. So I'm always trying to look at what's the characteristics of this market and how could I exist on this market and make a position on this market and make a successful position on this market. So that's what brought me into Eskilstuna Ölkultur when we started. And Sweden has its special characteristics with Systembolaget, with sort of trade-offs, positive and negative things with that. That's something we have to deal with. And then I don't know, I mean, we should try to fix that reduced alcohol tax because that's the big thing to have in place. That's the big thing to be a normal European country. And then I know a little bit too little about what kind of products people are looking for. Could be when the hype is over that people look more into traditional beer styles. And my take on that is, as I said before, I'm trying to make perfect beers in well-defined styles because those styles exist for a reason. Because if you make a perfect Belgian triple or Belgian double or extra special bitter or a Kölsch or something, it's a reason why those styles exist because that's good stuff. That's good beer. And perhaps you shouldn't try to invent new styles outside of those definitions. Instead, trying to make as good as possible inside the well-defined styles. I think that's a success thing for a brewery who aims to be local, to look into that. But if you make those, like you made several ones with what do you say, milk, vanilla, or...
Well, the blueberry muffin.
I mean, there are enough people in all of Sweden who wants to try that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But what will you do next and next and next?
Well, yeah, I'm a very creative person, so that for me, there's endless possibilities. You know, and it's I like but my setup was also too much artisan. You know, it was stirring by hand. The control was not there to it.
No.
You know, I could make a perfect triple once, but then the second time I would brew there, it would just there would be variety. There would be
Yeah.
I couldn't
No.
make a very consistent. You know.
No consistency. And that's okay with a small brewery, I think. But another thing that I looked into a little bit, and I think it's an opportunity to go deeper in that area, is to look into the herbs and the things that grows in Sweden. What's the characteristics in the Swedish nature out there? What can you pick and use for making a special beer?
I was very surprised that there was no flatter ale.
No, and that's a very good one. And I had success with this spruce ale when we picked the small spruce tops from the pine. That was, and you could go further down that area and see what is the season. Is it springtime? What can I pick from the nature and use in a beer? That's interesting.
Juniper was also nice.
Yeah.
Use that too.
And you made some very good work in that area, I think.
Yeah, I had these big open fermenters. So it was ideal for all kinds of fruit additions as well, because you don't have this giant cone which you have to empty. It was a nice big flat area where it could sail.
Drop something.
So I love making beer with fruit, and all my products were honest. I didn't use any syrup or flavoring or there were no natural flavors.
And that I really admire you for that. We didn't do that either, but many brewers now they go into they adding this chemical stuff just to get the flavor, and I hate it because that's not beer.
Yeah, for me that would take out the fun. As soon as I had to do that because of then I would just quit.
And I'm making in my home brewery now. I have a project going on with lambics in the traditional way. I have them under my house in the cellar, and they stand there for years. So I now have 3-year, 2-year, 1-year-old lambics, and I'm trying to blend them now to some kind of girls and see what happens. But it takes time, because those cultures it takes time. You can't rush it. Yeah. But I mean, when sour beer became a hype, what did happen on the market? People just added
lactic acid.
Lactic acid just to lower the pH. That's not sour beer to me.
No. Well, I used it in some fruit beers where it's fun to like the blueberry one.
Yeah.
That's because then it's not it's the sour then.
It was part of the fruit beer. That's a big thing.
Acid. It's just an I saw it as an ingredient.
Yeah.
To lower the pH and then balance it out with lactose. You have this candy kind of sweet and sour, and it gets nice and thick. And
you were a much more experimental brewer than I am. I'm looking more into traditional styles. But
I love those too. But I just
right
love everything. I also had a friend, a home brewer, and he didn't work that clean, and he didn't care so much about it. So a lot of his beers, got infected, and then he got some really strange flavors. One tasted really like strawberry, but he didn't put strawberry. The yeast created some weird, all kinds of weird off flavors.
And if you are not taking cleaning and sanitizing, if you don't focus on that and do it properly, you get Brettanomyces into it. It will arrive, and crazy enough, at some point in time you like it, but it shouldn't have been there because it's bad. It's bad cleaning process.
Yeah, but anyway, a lot of his beers I enjoyed because they had just an element of that surprised me. And it's a little bit like with a French cheese. Sometimes it's like. Oh, it stinks so much. I need to smell it again. You have this weird.
And if you if you over again, if you want to sell to Systembolaget, the product must be consistent.
Yeah,
Because if they
that's
buy my Stolt Lager 1 year and then they come back to a few weeks later or half a year later, it should
the same.
smell and taste the same.
Yeah.
That's the way it has to be with Systembolaget.
But a little bit variety, like you said, you know, and for a small, and for me that's also the charm, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get a cheese from a local farmer, you know, it's also there's variety in there as well.
Agree.
And that makes it fun. Like, oh wow, this is a really good one.
Yeah.
But there maybe one little thing about Eskilstuna Ölkultur, because well, now there's a startup. It went
bankrupt. I finished 3 years ago, and then it went bankrupt this summer. And there is a local solution that some businessmen, local entrepreneurs have taken it over. And I know a few of them, and they are good guys.
Yeah.
And I have given them my blessings.
Yeah.
And I really hope that they can make it fly. That would
because
be great.
it's a fantastic place.
Because when my wife and I, we usually meet some friends in Friday afternoons, and like the English pub culture that we go out early and go home early.
Yeah.
We have a few beers and then we go home, and it's Friday evening. And now we are, since when Ölkultur is not around anymore, we are lost. We don't know where to go, where to meet.
No.
So I really hope it will open up soon, and it will open up by the end of this year.
And but because it was a good rolling business, how you said it. Why do you think it went bankrupt? Was it just raising cost price?
Yeah, what I've heard is that so many small breweries were hit by the corona because it took a lot of energy and money out of small breweries, and we couldn't really recover from that. That's one part of the explanation. And another one was that when people now are getting having less money, we have bad times in Sweden. What is the thing you can reduce and save some money? It's on expensive beer. So it's difficult times now. But I really hope it will fly again.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought it was a very nice place to visit, just the whole atmosphere inside.
And also the summer pub on the other island. Eskilstuna's most beautiful outdoor beer garden.
Yeah.
And if this summer wouldn't have rained away, I think Eskilstuna Ölkultur would have been around.
Yeah.
Because July killed us. That's what I've heard. July killed us because too much rain.
Yeah. So just things stacking up on top of each other.
Small margins.
Yeah.
But we'll be back.
Yeah. That's nice.
We'll be back.
I'll be back. Okay, well I think then we have said everything then. Well, not everything.
There is more to say, but this was a good conversation. Really nice to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. Nice to see you again. Yes.